Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first Diamond Debate of 2026. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Rob. Thanks
Happy
for
New Year
joining.
to you too.
It's great to see you, and I'm excited to have you as our first guest for 2026. I think it's a uh, fitting duo, I think, to explore our topic for today, which is market rebound or continued pressure in 2026. What's going to happen? Is this going to be the year of correction? And so that's the question that we're going to be asking and debating. And there are many moving parts to it. Before we get to the actual debate, we want to acknowledge our much appreciated support from Sarine Technologies. For over 35 years, Sarine has asked the industry's big questions, providing advanced AI technology to drive the diamond sector forward. Imagining a more efficient and more innovative industry is central to Sarine's DNA and essential to long-term growth across the entire diamond ecosystem. That's actually one of my predictions for this year is that we've got this little traceability ecosystem which Sarine is very central to, and I think that's going to be one of the more competitive. We're going to see a different dynamic, I think, in that space. But that's kind of a side issue to today's topic. Let me ask you straight out, Rob. What are you seeing for 2026? You know, if we look at it black and white, are we are you foreseeing a correction in the diamond market, or is it just more pressure that we've experienced as we've experienced over the last few years?
You mean a correction upwards,
Yeah,
correct?
and improvements.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many variables, and the world is so, I would say, unstable now and unpredictable now. I mean, I don't think anybody expected that we'd be starting the new year with an invasion of Venezuela. So, um, yeah, there's just a lot of unpredictable things as far as the economy and as far as the world in general. I would say for the diamond market in particular, I think there's two big factors that will certainly help the natural diamond business. One is um, One is what happens when the purchase of De Beers, what's going to happen with De Beers, will it get purchased? I think that will bring much needed stability to the industry because they've done a lot of, interesting marketing campaigns. But the thing is, you need to have sustained interest in the campaigns. You just can't just do it as a one-off. You have to keep kind of at it, and I think it's very hard to do it when the business is in flux. It's not clear what's happening with the Natural Diamond Council. Right now it's mostly funded by De Beers, and it's possible that new owners may say, "Well, why are we funding another entity, especially when that entity is not really getting a lot of funding from other players?" I mean, they've tried, and they're certainly continuing to try, but it's hard. So that's a big issue. You have to get the De Beers purchase settled, and then I think the second thing, and that this is very much outside the industry's control, is what happens with Alrosa. Um, will the Russia-Ukraine war be settled? I don't think anybody knows that, and it's certainly out of our control. And even if it is settled, it's not clear if all the sanctions will be lifted. So, and whether Alrosa will be free to kind of do business with European-based companies and American-based companies, and free to fund the NDC. I think there was a argument. I think that certain people weren't sure if Alrosa, if the sanctions are listed, will Alrosa still be allowed to fund the NDC, given all the Russian image problems? I think at this point things are so desperate, things are so bad. I think you have really no choice but to let Alrosa get involved. And I think those are the two kind of main questions.
But I mean, are those market makers? I mean, there are issues in the industry, but in terms of affecting a rebound, I mean, and we made these sort of predictions in when the war in Ukraine began and Alrosa was sidelined. That I remember actually theorizing that having the Russian goods off the market would create a shortage, and that did not happen. So I'm not sure if that's a topic, and that I think in terms of the industry discussion is going to come is going to be prevalent. But I'm not sure if it affects the actual day-to-day trading and the state of demand and supply and the equilibrium in the marketplace.
Well, the reason I brought those two things up was because both things are related to demand. That having a more stable De Beers will increase the ability to do kind of sustained marketing campaigns and have a sense of what's going on going forward. And I think the same is with Alrosa. If Alrosa's can contribute to the NDC, that would be something that I think would have also a very healthy effect on demand. And one of the things, the prices of diamonds have fluctuated quite a bit over the last couple of years, and it's not really known if Alrosa is contributing to that, if they're selling at kind of lower prices. So that's also, I think, had a bit of an effect on demand. So I think things just need to be. We've gone through a whole bunch of years of instability, and I think things need to be stable. And I think once you get the infrastructure to promote diamonds, then and promote natural diamonds in particular, I should say, then things will go forward. As far as lab grown, which we always have to talk about, I think it's going to be relatively steady. I think there's a lot of movement in the market in India, and I think that's something that the natural business has to be very, mindful of and careful of, and try not to have it make the same gains in India that it has in the United States. But I don't necessarily think any big change as far as lab grown, unless certain retailers start to decide that it's just not profitable for them to sell it anymore.
Well, I've been sort of calling that the lab grown space is ripe for disruption. At retail, that those margins are still too high. The pricing of lab grown at retail is inconsistent, and that's going across different platforms, and consumers are going to be more aware of that. And so, and then I think retailers are, particularly in the United States, which is the more mature market, are facing a choice on the lab grown front, and I think we see this sort of play out in the bigger branded retailers, the Signets and Brilliant Earths of the world, where they're struggling. They seem to be struggling to find where their growth, which is their growth product, and they're selling more synthetics, more lab grown, but that's pulling their average price down, and that's sort of and so their growth has been stagnant in terms of revenue. And so my feeling is that choice and that tension is more widespread, and pushing retailers to one or the other, to focus on volume or on a volume play, go lower price points, or towards the higher price point value play in natural diamonds. And so I think that's something I'm keeping an eye on. And I'm expecting it to happen. I expected it to happen last year, frankly, but it didn't quite materialize to the extent that I thought it would. And I'm still a believer that it's going to happen this year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would give a couple of caveats to that. Is that, still a lot of people, when they buy lab grown, I think what you're saying makes sense, right? But also keep in mind that lab grown is a much lower end product. So if you're spending $1,500 on a lab grown versus $1,700, it's not the biggest deal in the world. Now I agree that some people mark things up like several $1,000s, and that's not. Those people are vulnerable. Um, and also, I think that a lot of consumers, and you can argue about the logic of this, still consider themselves that just by buying lab grown, they've gotten a deal because they haven't bought a natural and they're saving all this money. So, yeah, I think I agree, and I think obviously lab grown prices are going to get more competitive at retail. I mean, that's just the general way of the world, that things get competitive at retail. And when, especially, if tariffs come down, like things like Timu and all these places are going to start to sell lab grown, JC Penney and Walmart and all these places, and I think that will have a downward pressure on lab growns at retail. And just the overall gross margin dollars, I don't think most jewelers can survive on $1,500 engagement rings, $2,000 engagement rings. That's just not been their traditional business model. So they would have
Right.
to sell a lot more than they are now. So yeah, I agree with you to some extent. I think there are some unique things about the lab grown product that make it perhaps a little less ripe for disruption than natural diamonds were. When Blue Nile comes and they're selling things for $1,000 less, $1,500 less, that's a big deal. When you're talking about $100 less or $200 less, it's not so much of a big deal. It's still people. Nobody wants to spend more money than they need to, but
Yeah, but jewelers have a better argument against the Blue Nile claim. Whereas if when a consumer comes in with a price point of a lab grown diamond, that's GVS lab grown is the same diamond. It's a standardized product where so it lacks the nuance which the jeweler could talk their way out of in the Blue Nile scenario. Where customers came in with a Blue Nile price, looking for that diamond and wondering why there was such a disparity in price that they saw in the store. And there's fluorescence, there's so many different elements to the natural diamond, but you don't have that argument in the lab grown. But just this discussion about the retail, the emphasis of where retailers are putting their emphasis, does bring us back to the marketing question. Because I actually think the industry is going to, De Beers is putting their dollars into category marketing again, but there's going to be this realization, I think, that it requires more than a De Beers campaign, firstly, and it really depends more on the retail sales pitch. And so, what are retailers talking to their customers about? That's where the real category marketing comes into it. Which is why it's so important for like De Beers to tie in with the Jared and the Chateau Fuchs of the world in China and Tanishq that they are. But I'm not sure if it's widespread enough in that sense. So I'm hoping that's going to be the focus of category marketing. That there's real onboarding of retailers, and particularly independents, which I'm not sure if we really see in the same, to the extent that we wish.
yeah, and I think I mean, you look at what happened during the cartel years. I mean, De Beers, and again, I don't want to be one of those people who's like, "Oh, the old days were so much better." I mean, I think there's a little too much of that in this industry. But when De Beers was a cartel, um, and there was kind of no place else to go, they still had this thing called the Diamond Promotion Service, and the whole idea was to liaise with retailers to make sure that they're selling a lot of diamonds, right? And if you look at where lab grown first started making inroads, it's with the independents, right? And then later people like Signet started kind of following suit. But really, the
yeah,
independents were the people that kind of were originally lost to lab grown. So to really, uh, get the market back on track, the natural diamond industry really has to forge more relations with independents, and not just the kind of high end independents that have been selling things like Forever Mark and
yeah,
this
yeah,
new Origins brand, but the kind of mainstream mom and pop who have been pressed and started making better margins on lab grown, and we're like, okay, that's great. We like better margins, especially since they were, a lot of them kind of blame some of the bigger players like De Beers, for the situation they were in the first place. So,
well,
as
I think that's where the Natural Diamond Council could be effective, and that seemed to be where their focus was, but they didn't have the budget in the end to really to really put in place all the programs that they wanted. But it seems that their focus is on working with those independent retailers.
right, and I think there was always um, and I think that's good. I think that's really helpful because it's something that's not that expensive to do. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have somebody on the road all the time like the time promotion service did, but you need to kind of make sure that these people are on board and understand how to sell it. Because in some cases, you've had retailers who for 5 years or 10 years in some cases have been selling lab grown, and they're people don't necessarily know how to sell natural like they used to in the past because it's a much more expensive sale and it requires excuse me additional training, right?
Right.
So you do have a sense that you need better training for these people, and you need to give them a lot more resources to make sure to get them back in the habit of selling natural diamonds, because right now a lot of them have been selling lab grown. I think what is the role of the NDC, assuming there is one, is a very interesting question. And I think I think there's been a lot of debate. De Beers feels okay. We're funding the NDC. They should we should basically control it in a way. And obviously, it was meant to be more of an independent thing. And I like the idea of different organizations doing marketing. I think it brings a lot more fresh ideas to the table rather than just kind of all coming out of De Beers.
Yeah, and my concern has been that the NDC is a little too influenced by De Beers.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're their main funder, and I think there's always been.
But
I
in
think
terms of
nobody
the
wants to
way
be
they
the
do their marketing,
right, and I think there is a certain call for certain kind of negative messages, or there is perhaps a place for negative messages, or people see a place for negative messages. I've never been that crazy about it. I'm not
yeah,
sure how effective is it, and I think neither De Beers or the NDC wants to be the one to do it, right? Because nobody wants to be the bad guy, right?
yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of a debate between them, like who takes on that.
Well, I mean, I
Or
wouldn't want to see it being the main focus, a
no,
negative.
I don't think it will ever be the main focus. But I
Yeah,
think
it really needs to be very subtly and elegantly done to be effective. I think
you're
that's
correct.
but I am seeing, and I don't know if you've noticed that De Beers seems to be pushing all of its marketing through a Diamond is Forever as a platform. They've created this, and to me that feels a new way of using a Diamond is Forever. You have a longer history in the industry than even I, um, but it seems like there's when they've launched that A Diamond is Forever site, there were elements of the old NDC site in there, and the NDC changed its changed its focus on its website at least to be more educational, and rather than this newsy portal that it initially set out to be. So there is a little too much overlap for my liking. I think it'll be interesting to see how Botswana plays a role in that category marketing when they do. And that's regardless if they take ownership of De Beers or not, because part of their agreement with De Beers was to engage in category marketing.
Yeah, and
So
to underwrite it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
I think they will, and I think they'll see it as a chance to tell their story a little bit more with origin certified diamonds, and to make their case a little bit more, which will have a beneficial effect, I think, on the entire country. But right now, they're reaching out to Russia. They're trying to do both exports. Right now they seem a little. They're just do anything really to get themselves back on their feet. Which is not. It's not great, but I think I think at some point they will take a greater role as far as making sure that that their story is told, that they feel it hasn't been told, that they feel that they could be a quote unquote brand. And it's possible. I don't think it has really been proven, but it's a nice thing to talk about, and it happens to be true, so that's helpful.
My one concern or my other concern in the category marketing, realm, is if there's just too much emphasis on provenance. When we speak to, or when we hear from retailers, unless it's really a strong brand, it doesn't feel like that sort of origin story is quite sexy enough to bring in to really sell the consumer.
No, I would agree with that. I think at the end of the day, you need obviously style, and you need a nice look, and a good price point, and an attractive product. Just hey, buy from Botswana is not going to sell that many diamonds. That said, I think it does have some resonance for a certain consumer, and I think at its base, when you're talking about lab grown versus diamond natural, what are you talking about? You're talking about origin, right? Because they're both diamonds, right? Okay.
Right.
So you're talking about the origin and what that origin means and what that origin symbolizes. So I think as part of the origin story, I think it is a possibly important component, and not everybody's going to care. Some people still think that Botswana, that people work there $2 a day and they're all slaves. I mean, it's nonsense, right? Because there are unions, and there's protection over there, and it's a well-run industry. But people do have these misconceptions, and I think it's going to take a while to kind of get to there. I think I don't have any kind of big solution that nobody else has, and I think the general consensus is that you have to market. You have to put yourself out there and make your case. And I think that the natural industry is beginning to do that, but it's going to take a long time. I mean, it took a long time to get where we are as far as lab grown. It took about a decade for the industry to kind of lose its kind of all this market share. And, to even get recover another 5% of market share or 10% of market share. I mean, who knows how long it's going to take, right?
Yeah,
and that's,
yeah.
So I think, it's something that is important. It's something that needs to be done. I think the industry, one kind of good thing that the industry is looking at is the fact that, we are, at least in the United States, I think the market's really bifurcating, not just as far as, natural versus lab grown, but the, incomes are bifurcating. So you talk to wealthy consumers, they're going to spend a lot, they're planning to still spend a lot. They're doing very well. Lower and middle income consumers are not doing well. right? So I mean that has certain benefits for lab grown, but I think it has certain benefits for natural, because if the high end is very strong, in the kind of Tiffany and Cartiers, and I think we've seen that throughout the year, are doing very well. I think that's going to bode very well for natural. And I think, I mean, the really sad thing is, if there were no lab grown, and if there were no um, Alrosa, a Russian invasion of Ukraine, and it's kind of stupid to talk about because obviously those things do exist. But if those things weren't around, this could be a huge boom time for diamonds, because you look at what's happening with gold, you look at what's happening with jewelry prices. I mean, with jewelry sales rather. I mean, this could and should have been like the best time ever for diamonds, but it unfortunately didn't work out
Well,
that way.
I mean, I'm not sure I 100% agree with you. Obviously, it would be better without the lab grown competition, and but I think I think the industry underestimates the radical changes in the way that business has been done. You mentioned the good old days of the De Beers cartel, but that enabled a sizable industry that was profitable for many different layers of the industry, and in today's marketplace, that was never going to be sustainable. And so I think we would always have had this contraction of maybe not at retail, but all these efficiencies and all these sort of streamlining of the diamond pipeline um, would have taken place anyway, and that squeezes players out of the market, and I think when we look at polished diamond prices that have been on a general downtrend since 2011, with one or two, an uptick here and there, but the general trend has been down. That's not only as a result of lab grown. It's a result of the immense changes that have taken place in the industry, and so you may be right that at retail, there would have been that opportunity, but for growth. But China would have also still been happening,
Yeah,
and
China's.
that's also had an impact on the midstream and the mining sector. So maybe we wouldn't have been in such a dire position as we are today. But I think there's still the structural sort of issues that the industry's dealing with, that's being amplified by the increased market share that lab grown has taken.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point. Uh, I could easily see a different reality where, like in 2011, for example, before, when diamond prices were going up this kind of tremendous amount because people saw them as a store of value, just like they kind of see gold right now. I think it's very possible that, diamonds could be seen that way. And, all those structural problems existed during COVID, and, it was a huge boom, right? So, yeah, there's going to always be structural issues, and the diamond pipeline is what it is. Um, uh, I mean, I think that this industry has never really gotten over the end of De Beers, right? The end of the cartel, I should say. Obviously, De Beers is still with us,
Yeah, yeah,
but uh, and you look at all these people saying, De Beers, run this marketing campaign, save us, please save us. You know, that's you know, De Beers said about 15 years ago it didn't want to do that anymore, and that it wanted to, have the site holders do it, and it didn't work. And I think that's what, it's part of the reason for the mess we're in right now. But Yeah, I really do think that with big jewelry sales and with people interested in kind of alternative investments like crypto, like gold, I think diamonds could have done well. I mean, it doesn't. It's a shame. It doesn't really make sense to talk about because of we're obviously in
It's
the
a
current world.
would have, should have,
Yeah,
could have,
yeah.
but the difference is that there is very minimal investor proposition for diamonds. It's, in other words, and by that I mean, with gold, demand is driven by jewelry, by investments, by, you know whatever, number of factors. Diamonds doesn't have that. The investor element to it is very minimal, and so it's all dependent on consumer demand. And so,
Yeah,
and
I mean, it could have grown that element of investor interest, and certainly in 2011 you saw that, right? You saw people like advertising on the radio, "Hey, invest in diamonds." Supply is going down and demand's going up.
how
Remember
was
those
that
big charts,
investment,
right?
Bob? How did that turn
Those
out for you?
Yeah, which didn't work out so well, but there was a bit of an investment community. Look, again, we don't live in that world, but
Yeah, yeah,
I think, yeah, I think with jewelry sales doing so well, and again, this interest in kind of like things like crypto, which has zero case, right? There's no, I don't really understand there's no real
yeah,
case for
yeah,
crypto, right? It doesn't really exist. So it's just kind of like money that we say it is. So I mean, at least diamonds, there is some connections to the real world, just like there is with gold and with platinum and with silver. I mean, it really is amazing to me. When I tell people what I do, so many people are investing in like gold and silver. And I was at a doctor's office recently. It's a couple months ago. It was when kind of a period of economic turmoil, which kind of uh, rears its head every now and then. And I remember the nurse was saying to me like, "Oh yeah," she asked me what I did, and I told her. She's like, "Oh yeah, I'm investing in gold. Do you think that the dollar's going to collapse?" I was like, it's such a weird conversation to be having like in a doctor's office, But I think this is like, I think it has really penetrated the idea of people that that jewelry is a hard asset. And again, it's like that would be such a great case for diamonds in a normal world, right? That
yeah,
this is a hard asset. This is something that the supply was allegedly going down, demand was supposed to be going up. Um, so yeah, I think that's it could have been really good. I think you're correct that China's obviously always going to be a factor, but regardless, I mean, I think there is certain opportunities. I think people are it's very funny, for months people be like, oh, people don't care that diamonds are that diamonds, hold their value. It's not important to people. And I agree, it's not important to a lot of people, but you look at all this talk about gold and how many people like gold and how many people want to buy gold, not just gold as a commodity, but gold as an object. And that is really the thing about it, that they see it as an asset. Now we all know that gold goes up and down, and it could possibly go down, start going down tomorrow. Like nobody really knows, right? But I
yeah.
think there is this sense that gold is that is the kind of uh, pitch for diamonds that people may not be listening to it for diamonds, but they are listening to it for gold.
Well, I don't think you can pitch diamonds as an investment
No,
opportunity,
I don't think as an
but I
investment.
think,
I think as a
but I think you're right in that, that there is an asset there, and that needs to be emphasized.
Yeah,
That,
and I think yeah, and I agree. Let me just clarify, because yeah, I don't think diamonds will ever be an shouldn't ever be pitched as investment. I don't necessarily think gold should be is a steady investment, but people obviously buy it. Um, I would say that diamonds should be pitched as an asset, just like
yeah,
the apartment I'm coming here. I own this apartment, right? It may go up, it may go down. The New York apartments have not done great over the last couple of years, but it's something. It's something I own. It's an asset. At the end of the day, it's going to be worth something, and I think that's true about diamonds. That it's an asset. It's worth something. It might go up, it might go down, but it's never going to go to zero. And I think that is a key difference with lab grown, which will probably go to zero.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there is, it's a very fine line though, because you've got to really explain the difference between an asset and an investment.
And it's not that easy, but I think people get it. I mean, people do, buy apartments.
For our last 10 minutes, let's look at 2026 for a few minutes, if you don't mind. I'd always look at the industry in cycles, and we would always say a good holiday season is going to stimulate retailers to dip into the polished market to replenish goods that they sold during the holiday season, and that creates a cycle that stimulates rough demand. And so generally we used to have this sort of spike in trading in the first quarter. I'm not sure. I don't feel like we've seen that in the last 2 or 3 years. But firstly, was there? You're sitting in New York, there in the heart of retail United States. What's the feedback from the holiday season, and would that be sufficient to stimulate that sort of cycle that I described?
I mean, I think the holiday happened. I think it didn't stop.
That we know for sure.
Yeah. I think the malls were, where I went were relatively crowded. I think, and again, I think it's people on the high end are doing very well. And I think, if you had a high end store, that was probably kind of the place to be. And the more expensive people, I don't think necessarily if you're middle class, the people who are, to the extent the middle class still exists, or lower income, I don't think, I think it was tough. I mean, I know a bunch of people who've lost their jobs recently, so it's not that easy out there. It's a little tough. And I've spoken to people who say, it's really, really bad out there. It's not really being reflected in the official statistics. But, I do think if you're a high end person, you do very well. As far as your question, I think, I think that, kind of the traditional industry boom and bust, like, oh, things were great. So, and then all of a sudden people buy rough and then they realize there's no market and then it goes down. I mean, I think that, I think that's really part of the issue right now. Right. And I think that, people need to kind of be very steady and, kind of buy as far as, what they need. And I think I think that would ultimately be a healthier market if people buy as far as what they need rather than kind of some projected, increase in demand, and then that kind of is matched a couple months later by a decrease in demand. So rough goes really up, and then rough goes really down. I don't think that's not a healthy market, and I think that's kind of how it's been for a long time. I
would say that I'm optimistic that is that we're going to be more stable in that sense in 2026, because I think that the influence of the De Beers site in the rough market has diminished. I think that was one of the big changes that we saw in 2025. That as the Beers pulled back its selling, others carried on, and there was this sort of a more even distribution of rough sales, and that's going, with Okavango, the Botswanas coming onto the market in a bigger way with their contract sales. The Angolans were selling a lot of rough. Alrosa coming back potentially into the legitimate market. and the rough tenders as well are having more of an influence on market sentiment. You're not having that same knee-jerk sort of reaction that the dependency on the site system sort of simulated before,
Right. And I think that, I mean, you look at what happened in a couple of times, like, I think at this point, and maybe I don't know if this is deliberate or they stumbled into it. I think De Beers kind of knows how to kind of get the market excited. That they just announced like 5, marketing campaigns. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, and that gets people psyched. And that definitely has that definitely boosts market sentiment to some extent. You look at what happened after JCK. Obviously, the fact that sales were actually decent at JCK obviously helped also. But I think the fact that I think De Beers, if they went and tomorrow they started announcing like 5 different marketing initiatives, we're going to put all this money to this, we're going to put all this money to that. I think that would help the market. But I think that, if it's not related to the fundamentals and if they don't intend to follow through, and if, I think that would hurt in the long term. So I think, I think it's going to be very tough. And I think it's better to have, slow and steady. I mean, when the market really starts to jam, then you can get into a much better place. But right now, I mean, and especially in the United States, I mean, there's a lot of goods because everybody wants to beat the tariffs, which we actually haven't talked about yet. But I think there's a sense that the tariffs in India will be dropped at some point, but they haven't been dropped yet. And I think that's still a big issue for people in India.
Yeah, and I think to answer my original question, about that cycle of trading and that first quarter bounce, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of inventory in the United States, and so the buying, the replenishment of retail inventory may not be felt across the global trading centers as much as we might like to. But I think you're right. I think there's it's fewer better things that the industry is also has that choice to make. It's been a volume driven industry for so long, and now it's more because we don't have the market share that it used to. That it's a more selective market, and there, as Martin Rapport always would say, the riches are in the niches. It's not going to have the same volumes as before, and I think the industry's come to that realization. And so, if we were to make one global prediction or for the market for this year, I would say it would be that there would be more of a conscious effort to maintain that stability with and manage those inventory levels across the board.
Right.
We'll see if that happens.
It's harder when, as you mentioned, Alrosa is kind of to some extent locked out, is kind of a black box right now. So nobody knows exactly what they're doing and where they're selling and how they're selling it. And again, like whether they're kind of ever, able to kind of legally sell in the United States is kind of a question above both our pay grades.
And when you have state companies needing to sell, and so Angola pushes it up to the market. Kavango might do the same, so that
I think I think that's the danger, that you're going to see a lot of panic selling in the market. But I would say, I think that when you look at the year ahead, again, I think we both agree that marketing is key and that making your case is key. And it's just a matter of doing it in a sustained, methodical way. And it's going to it'll take years to really kind of recover some of the lost ground. But I don't think it's impossible. I think it's going to be challenging. And you look at, De Beers has kind of come up with a lot of different ideas how to sell natural diamonds, and some have worked and some have not, and it feels like they're going through a lot of ad agencies, a lot of different variations. So it's been very, I think it's become more of a challenge than perhaps they even realize. But I do think there's a case to be made, and hopefully they'll for their sake at least, hopefully they'll be able to make it, and for the and I think that I think that people are a little panicked, and I don't think it's healthy. I think that when I look at what the president of Botswana is saying, I mean, he has a true crisis, so I don't blame him for panicking, but it's a crisis, and you need to be able to kind of focus and keep a calm head and to kind of execute your strategy. And it's going to be it'll be a challenge, but it has this industry has always been a challenge, and it's managed to survive and persist. So
Well, if we would look at the industry as an exercise of technical analysis, and looking at the industry's growth graph, it's been on a decline for the last 3 years, and that maybe would suggest that we were due a a rebound. But it's not as clear cut as that. It requires.
I think that you look at the lower end goods, right, that are much nicer with lab grown synthetics than with the natural diamonds. You look at those low. I think a lot of that business is just gone. I mean, I don't think they're ever going to recover it, like the kind of fashion, kind of what people call junk goods. I don't think that's really that. I think that's going to be very, very hard to come back, because you don't have the argument like, oh, this holds its value and it's precious. I mean, this is,
although they could compete on price,
Yeah, I mean, you have to go way down, right? So,
well, maybe they're there. I don't know. I mean, they're
and the lab grown will always look nicer. So, because natural is due to nature, and lab grown is about changing the dial. So, it'll be a challenge, but nobody, the people working on it have know diamonds very well, and understand marketing, and we'll just have to hope. And I think there's a lot of what I think is good. What I see is good is that people who really believe in natural diamonds and want to do better with natural diamonds, really have a certain passion about it. And I think one of the things I think helped lab grown a lot in its early days was the people really were very, very passionate about it. And I think now you're seeing that in the natural business, and everybody's coming up with ideas, and hey, I came up with this great idea in the shower, and I'm going to write about it on LinkedIn. I think that there is a certain energy and excitement and desire to promote natural diamonds, which wasn't necessarily there before. So I think that's exciting, and I think people realize. Okay, obviously the nation of Botswana will have a very, very tough time with that diamond revenue, and it's caused lab growns have caused a lot of suffering there. I would say that I don't see how the jewelry industry can survive on $1,200 engagement rings going forward.
Yeah, so, that's the other retail disruption, that retailers need a certain percentage of their sales to be natural, and so it's got to maintain a certain level, in my estimation, anyway. So Rob, thanks very much. I think you brought a lot of insights to the discussion. I'm not sure if we took a position or not, either of us, on whether there would be.
We kind of debated among ourselves. We debated with ourselves, like, maybe I don't know.
Maybe there'll be a rebound. Maybe there won't. Maybe there'll be more pressure. I think there's a bit of both in store for us. I think that there's still a lot of those structural issues that are affecting the market, but there is also I think there's some opportunity for growth this year. I do believe that. Whether that will be enough to offset those structural issues that are affecting the midstream and the mining segments more than the retail, in my opinion. I'm not sure if it's there, but I think we'll see that tension play out. But thanks so much for joining
Yeah,
me.
can I plug my novels? Is it okay?
Yeah, of course. Let
Okay, all
everyone
right.
know where you can
Yes,
find you.
I've written 4 novels about the diamond industry. So if you don't hear enough about the diamond industry, you can always read one of my books. They're all mystery novels. They're fun. They're with the same characters. Uh, the latest one is on lab grown diamonds. In case you've never heard of those, and they're at robbatesauthor.com. And that's it. I'm also at JCK and.
Yeah, sorry. I realize now that I actually didn't introduce you formally.
Okay.
I just kind of assume that everyone knows who Rob Bates is.
Well, that's very nice. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
But
I'm no Avi Krawitz.
certainly check out Rob's writing on JCK. It really keeps me informed, and and his books are a lot of fun. I've read
Well,
one
thank
of
you.
them, admittedly.
And
I have a few to go through.
I
So
enjoy Avi's newsletter, and everybody should subscribe and check it out.
thank you. Thanks, Rob. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you next week. We've got a great guest lined up for us next Tuesday. We'll see you then.